This is a shortened version of the very majestic chapter 9 of St. John, and I often quote the very last line, which you don't have today, even when I'm not preaching on this gospel, because it's so telling and so challenging. At the very end, the Pharisees overhear Jesus' conversation with the man and say, "So are we blind?" And Jesus answers, "Well, if you were blind, you'd have no sin. But since you say we see, your sin remains." That is a very challenging phrase for all of us, especially religious people like the Pharisees. We see, we have the truth, we know everything. And we can be really self-complacent and blind. Because none of us, and I literally mean none of us, sees as deeply as we're called to see, as we might see. Jesus says we wouldn't have any guilt if we were blind. We all start that way, and okay. But if we walk around saying, "Oh, we see," well, then we're in trouble. So how do we see? Well, we come to Jesus, and he can help us see. It's a manner of seeing, not so much what we see, but how we see. And there has to be a deep inner silence, as I've said many times, a deep inner openness and focus and attention and inner silence, and getting away from all our mental chatter and our prejudices and agendas, to be able really to see anything. Not just Christ, but Christ is what we'll see everywhere. If we really see, as I said 2 weeks ago, we had the Gospel of the Transfiguration, we begin to see a light in everything, that everything is created in and through the Word, who became flesh, that we see the presence of God in everything and everyone. That's when we start to see. In fact, we can say that it's like that we see the light like in the Transfiguration, but we see as God sees, as Christ sees, because that's, of course, how Christ sees. And we become that vision. The medieval Dominican Meister Eckhart said that the eye with which we see God is the same eye with which God sees us. If we reach that point. In heaven, hopefully we will. But here below, we begin to have divine vision. See how God sees, how Christ sees. Our vision is limitless. One of the early desert fathers in the 4th century, when he was asked by one of his young students, how should I pray? What should I do? And he says, "Become all I." It's a funny image, but that's EYE, by the way. Not become all I, capital I. That's what most of us do, I think. We see, So we need to allow Christ to enlighten us. So we can begin to see as God sees. The first reading is a great example. Here, Samuel comes to anoint the next king, and Jesse parades his, burly, handsome sons who are very tall and very affecting. And Samuel says, "No, they look the part, but that's the way humans judge people, by their appearance, Not as God sees, because God sees the heart. God sees more deeply. And that's why David comes in, who is judged to be the one with the pure heart to follow his vocation. So if we get that kind of vision, we almost become the vision. And that's the other thing. It's not just light that allows us to see, like corrective lenses or, a sensory faculty. Notice the second reading. It says, once you were darkness, but now you are light. You don't just see with new light, you are light. Just like Christ in the Transfiguration radiated his divine light, is his whole light, human as well. And we become light. Once you were darkness, now you are light in the Lord. And that's why it says at the very end, quoting an early hymn, Christ, rise from the dead, you who are asleep, and Christ will give you light. Not just to see, but to become, to be. Because that's who Christ is. There's no separation of light and life, or love for that matter, in God. So for the gospel acclamation today that we just recited, that I'll sing a little bit later from John chapter 8, and Christ says, whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. This light is alive because it's the divine life and the divine light and the divine love in us. The prologue of St. John says the same thing. It says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. Through him all things were made. Nothing that was made without him. In him was life, and the life was the light of the human race. So the life that is in God, the life that is God, becomes our life. We live the divine life. I am the resurrection and the life, but it's also our light. Whoever follows me will have the light of life. So that's a good measure for us of how far we've come in being alive and being able to see and to be light. So that's what it feels like. We feel radiant and alive. And everywhere we look, every person we see, every plant and flower, every cat and dog is radiant with divine life. That's what we see, because we are it. We resonate with it. The radiance of divine light and life and love in the universe. Takes a while to get there, and I hope we don't wait till we get to heaven in order to have that beatific vision, which is light and life and love. But it's a good measure for us to, a good standard to measure ourselves against. In other words, in my daily life, do I feel radiant with divine life and radiant with love? And is that what I see and radiate to others and what radiates back to me? If not, we can come to the Lord very humbly and honestly and say, Lord, I'm still blind. I don't come forward and say, we see, because I realize I don't. But you can help me see. You can be my sight, my life, and my love. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life.